Welcome to episode number 48 of Detour 365, and we are still in our Christmas / Advent series, and we are looking at Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. This is a shorter passage than what we've been used to lately, but it is chocked full of things to discuss. So I will give it over to Bill, who is reading from his translation of choice, CJB,
the Complete
Jewish Bible translation. All right. And again, this is Luke 2, 1 through 7, and this is a passage that we are all probably very familiar with. We've heard the Christmas story, but it's always good to revisit these things because we could very often read these stories and get, kind of have them committed to memory, but kind of lose the meaning and implication of what was actually going on and the significance of it. So. But anyway, here is Bill. He's going to read.
Oh my. Around this time, Emperor Augustus issued an order for a census to be taken throughout the empire. This registration, the first of its kind, took place when Quirinius was governing in Syria. Everyone went to be registered, each to his own town. So Joseph, because he was a descendant of David, went up from the town of Nazareth in the Galilee to the town of David called Bethlehem in Yehuda to be registered with Miriam, to whom he was engaged and who was pregnant. While they were there, the time came for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her first child, a son. She wrapped him in cloth and laid him down in a feeding trough, because there was no space for them in the living quarters.
Very good. As a lot of translations have it as in, but it's probably more like what you said. There was a guest house they were staying at, and there was a living quarters with limited number of sleeping spots. And do you think it was a... I've often wondered in the timing of the birth and everything, if they were expecting her to give birth at this time, so that's why they weren't, they didn't have a whole room to themselves. If you're staying with a bunch of relatives and you're not expecting to give birth, you could probably squeeze in a room with 10 people sleeping on the floor or something like that, but if you're expecting to give birth, they might not want you giving birth in a room with 8 other people sleeping on the floor while they're trying to sleep.
I think that's very much it, and there's only so much space.
Yeah.
And I think that they were just trying to pack as many people into the house as they could, and with Mary pregnant, the most convenient place for her would have been out with the animals. I mean, the place with the animals would have been adjacent to the living quarters anyway.
Yeah.
And somebody was going to have to be there.
And I do kind of wonder. Well, we'll get back to the living quarters because there are a few things about that, but the reason for them going to Bethlehem, of course, I mean it states that the census was happening, but I'm wondering too how many descendants of David were there that Bethlehem was just packed with people, because you're looking at 14 generations. And why trace your ancestry back to David? Was that just kind of like
Like a social security number,
maybe? I mean, was it? I mean, I could understand, like, the concept of the tribe. David was in the tribe of Judah, right?
Yeah.
But, if you look back 14 generations from where you are, and let's say you were living in a place where you had to report back to the place where, I mean, that's just so far removed. He is a descendant of David, but he's so far removed from David that why didn't they just, I mean, the story makes sense from what it says, but I just wonder why this journey was really necessary. Couldn't they, if you're doing a census, wouldn't you want to do it in the place that you were living? Or is that just like
that would make sense. This is the government.
like the census that we get, every 4 years here in the U.S. I wouldn't say like, well, the town where my grandfather was born was in Indiana, so I'm going to say that I'm from Indiana, or, that.
Well, I think it made sense for the Jews.
Yeah.
Because that was the most significant tribal connection that they had, was going back to David. And thus they wanted that as the significant placeholder. That was the only thing that I've ever been able to figure out. How many generations do you want to go back?
Yeah.
And it made sense that it would be David in that light to me.
Because if you go back farther, it would be, they'd be traveling to somewhere else, I don't know how, well, David, Jesse, Boaz, who was Boaz's father, if you keep going back, they weren't in Bethlehem anymore, it was just,
Well,
did everybody go back 14 generations, you think, or do you think it was just that David was such a significant figure that they saw that as kind of their hometown, even though they weren't really living there? It's just where their family was from.
I think it's just that David was such a significant individual in the overall culture of Israel that that they caused him to be a placeholder in the whole of calling your ancestry. Now, I don't have any idea who else could have been called a placeholder like David, because they had to have other individuals to have been used well, you all have to be called, go to, you know,
Yeah, if you weren't a descendant of David, if you were a descendant of somebody else, where would you? Was it just the descendants of David that were traveling, that had to travel? Because
yeah. I mean,
maybe,
it doesn't make sense that only the descendants of David would have had this traveling thing put upon them.
yeah. Hmm. That's just something I've always wondered when I've heard this story. Um, just because as we were talking, it was such a long journey, even though it doesn't seem, it was 90 miles or so. It doesn't seem very far to us, but to them, being pregnant and sitting on a donkey, and it would take,
A
as
week.
you said, about a week, yeah, to get from Nazareth to Bethlehem.
Was that David's town?
Bethlehem, yeah. Yeah.
So that's another clue in this.
So I guess there was some strong reason to kind of maintain this tie with David, because otherwise I don't think the Romans really cared, as long as you said, as they just wanted a count, right? The Romans,
Yeah, the Romans would have just wanted the numbers.
yeah, yeah.
I wonder how long it had been since the last census, because it said this was the first census since Quirinius was governor. And yet it was Augustus who ordered it.
Yeah, I don't know how often the Romans did censuses, or censuses.
I shall ask. Excuse me.
Which,
Well, I got the impression that this was the first census.
oh,
Because at least the way it's worded here, this registration, the first of its kind,
oh, is that what it says?
at least in this translation, took place when Quirinius was governing in Syria.
Oh, okay.
So I got the impression that they never did anything like this before.
I mean, it would have been a big undertaking to do, right? I mean,
And very expensive.
yeah.
So you wouldn't do anything like this very often.
Yeah, because it would take a lot of people away from like what they were doing normally, and it would be kind of a
Pain.
costly to the empire, I would think, even though you would get some economic activity from people staying in places and all that, but something about this that kind of always has, I guess, also fascinated me is how God worked through a Roman emperor and a governor and this circumstance to bring, because it was part of the prophecy that the Messiah was to be born in Bethlehem. And that was something that kind of came up later on in Jesus's life, because people knew that he was from Nazareth, and so some people doubted that didn't believe him, that who he said he was, because they said, like, well, he's from Galilee, and that's not where the Messiah is supposed to be from. But he was born in Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of a way to make that happen. And it seems just in reading this that, and especially if this was like the first time this had happened, or at least like in a lifetime, God somehow gave the Roman emperor the idea, like, hey, it'd be a good idea to have a census,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe he thought it was his own idea, but he somehow got this idea to do the census then, and it was kind of timed perfectly so that Mary gives birth when they get to Bethlehem. I mean, you don't think Joseph really had an awareness of the prophecy that, oh, you're pregnant, we better get you to Bethlehem so you can give birth to fulfill the prophecy. You don't think he...
I don't think either Mary or Joseph were cognizant of the prophecy about the Messiah needing to be born in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
I don't think either of them were into the theological intertwinings, the prophecies needing to be fulfilled by their child.
Well, and it was, I also, that reminds me of when the wise men come to Herod's court much later, and they consult, and it's almost like only the scribes or the scholars know about this prophecy. It's not like, it seems like, well, Herod really wasn't Jewish. He really wasn't that connected, right, to the, I mean,
yeah,
he was just kind
clueless.
of a partier. I don't know.
Yeah, he was clueless.
Yeah.
Your Pharisees would have been aware of the prophecies. Your scribes would have been aware of the prophecies. But that was it.
I found some information that said that Roman emperors frequently used the census to accurately count the population for taxation purposes.
Ah.
And it was
I mean, that
crucial
makes
for the
sense.
Roman military and infrastructure projects.
Ah.
But I guess you wouldn't do it every...
It was considered the first widespread census taken across the entire Roman
widespread.
emperor under his reign. It said that not necessarily the first census ever, though. That's just one review.
You know, this kind of reminded me of something in the Old Testament, too, the concept of census and David, because didn't David have... Wasn't there an instance where David, while he was king, he was sort of tempted in some way into doing a census of the people, and that was like considered a sin? You recall that? It was then he had to choose between you know, a famine or a plague, or
At least right now, that doesn't
that's in
set off bells in my memory, but
that's but it was insinuated that it was a supernatural force that prompted David to do the census.
Samuel 24:1.
Samuel 24:1. Let's see what that says.
That doesn't make sense because in the first it says that God moved David to do it, and then later in that chapter he punishes him.
You use 2 Samuel 24:1 or first?
Samuel 24. Oh, 2 Samuel, I'm sorry.
Oh, 2 Samuel.
I didn't look at
2
the word
Samuel
before there. Yes, 2 Samuel.
24:1.
That's all. I've never heard of that.
Which, okay, so the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, so God was angry before, or?
It says that he moved David to take a census, and then later in
Yeah.
the chapter he punishes him. I don't understand that, but it says that Satan was involved in this somehow.
But then
Oh, there's a parallel account.
it said David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people, and David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly. I thought the prophet
Chronicles
Nathan
21.
confronts him, or maybe I'm confusing that with the Bathsheba thing.
Well, it gives another First Chronicles 21 that to
What's
build.
that
It
say?
says,
First Chronicles 21.
verse 1.
But through the census and the punishment and all that, it
It doesn't make sense.
prompted David to buy the threshing floor of
Oh. Maybe it's what he did with the money.
the threshing floor of Aruna the Jebusite, and I believe that that was where the temple was to be built eventually.
That I don't remember.
As far as I remember, let's see. He goes and buys the threshing floor, and then they build the temple on where he bought, I believe. Let me see. Flipping through First Kings. I guess you could search, was the threshing floor of Aruna the Jebusite. I'm probably mispronouncing the name. Was that where they built the temple? Let's see. We're taking a short. Maybe I should pause this while we look this up. We'll pause
Wow.
this.
This is very hard.
Second Chronicles?
Yeah, you pause that.
I'm going to restart it here. So, the sin, you were just reading the passage about David being incited to take the census.
Yeah, and right immediately after that talks about the punishment for the sin.
Yeah, of taking the census.
Yeah. You ready?
Yeah.
The adversary now rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. David said to Joab and the leaders of the people, go take a census of Israel from Beersheba to Dan. Then report to me so that I can know how many of them there are. Joab said, may Adonai make his people 100 times as many as they are now. But my lord the king, aren't they all my lord's servants in any case? Why does my lord the king require this? Why should he bring guilt upon Israel? Nevertheless, the king's word prevailed against Joab. So Joab left and went through all Israel, after which he came to Jerusalem. Joab reported the results of the census to David. In Israel, there were 1,100,000 men who could handle a sword, while Judah had 470,000 men who could handle a sword. But he didn't count Levi or Benjamin among them, because the king's order was hateful to Joab. God was displeased with this and therefore punished Israel. David said to God, I have greatly sinned by doing this, but now please put aside your servant's sin, for I have done a very foolish thing. Adonai spoke to Gad, David's seer. Go and tell David that Adonai says, I am offering you a choice of 3 punishments. Choose one of them, and I will execute it against you. Gad came to David and said to him, Take your choice of 3 years of famine or 3 months of being swept away by your enemies while your enemy's sword overwhelms you, or 3 days of Adonai's sword, plague in the land with the angel of Adonai destroying everywhere in Israel's territory. Now think about what answer I should give to the one who sent me. David said to Gad, "This is very hard for me. Let me fall into the hand of Adonai because his mercies are very great, rather than have me fall into the hand of man." So Adonai sent a plague on Israel. 70,000 of the people of Israel died. So God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But when he was about to carry out the destruction, Adonai saw it and changed his mind about causing such distress. So he said to the destroying angel, "Enough, now withdraw your hand." The angel of Adonai was standing at the threshing floor of Ornan, the Yebusi. David raised his eyes and saw the angel of Adonai standing between the earth and the sky, and in his hand was a drawn sword stretching out over Jerusalem. Then David and the leaders, wearing sackcloth, fell on their faces. David said to God, "Wasn't it I who ordered the census of the people? Yes, I am the one who has sinned and done something very wicked. But these sheep, what have they done? Please let your hand be against me and my father's family, but not against your people, striking them with this plague." Then the angel of Adonai ordered Gad to tell David to go and set up an altar to Adonai on the threshing floor of Ornan, the Yebusi. David went up at Gad's word, spoken in Adonai's name. Ornan turned back and saw the angel, and his 4 sons who were with him hid themselves as Ornan was threshing wheat. David approached Ornan. When Ornan looked and saw David, he went out from the threshing floor and prostrated himself before David with his face to the ground. Then David said to Ornan, "Let me have the parcel with its threshing floor so that I can build on it an altar to Adonai. I will pay you its full value so that the plague will be lifted from the people." Ornan said to David, "Take it for yourself, and let my lord the king do what it seems to be good to him. I'm giving you the oxen for the burnt offerings, the threshing sledges for firewood, and the wheat for the grain offering. I am giving it all." But King David said to Ornan, "No, I insist on buying it from you at the full price. I refuse to take what is yours for Adonai or offer a burnt offering that costs me nothing." So David bought the place from Ornan for 600 shekels of gold by weight, 15 pounds. Then David built an altar to Adonai there and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. He called on Adonai, who answered him from the heaven by fire on the altar for burnt offerings. Adonai gave an order to the angel, and he put his sword back in its sheath. When David saw that Adonai had answered him at the threshing floor of Ornan, he sacrificed there. For at that time the tabernacle of Adonai, which Moshe had made in the desert, together with the altar for burnt offerings, were in the high place at Gibeon. But David could not go into its presence to consult God, because the sword of the angel of Adonai had struck him with terror.
Huh.
I don't recall anywhere where God changed his mind before in the Bible. That's new.
That is kind of funny enough, this probably would be a passage we'll look at in our series that we've been in before we started this Advent series, and that we'll pick up again. That talks about God not changing his mind, but changing his mind.
God having human-like characteristics.
Human-like characteristics, yeah.
Oops.
But I do wonder if, and I would do a Google search, but I'm recording on here. I guess I can pause it. But I think that threshing floor was where they would build the temple.
Which would make it the same place that
Abraham
sacrificed Isaac.
He's going
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
He didn't sacrifice.
Well,
Was going.
where he went to sacrifice Isaac.
Let's see if I can do a quick search here. Let me see. We're still recording. There we go.
God, how God would incite David to do one thing and then punish him later for following his directions.
Was the temple built? Oh, the temple was built on the threshing floor of Orna the Jebusite.
Okay,
So
it's all the same place.
So in this instance, it's kind of curious that you have this supernatural forces causing a ruler, in this case David, to do a census, which causes, a lot of destruction and a lot of hardship, and but the end result is that they buy this plot of land that so happens to be the place where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, and God provided the ram instead, and then the place where the temple was going to be built. Which I don't know. I just find that interesting. That was there something uniquely. I guess when it comes to a census of the people of Israel, it's different than the Romans doing a census. Because the Romans were just wanting to know how much they were going to tax. But it seems like this had something to do with ego or something. Like he was kind of tempted to know, like, how big is my kingdom? And
The verses that we have been shown tonight don't show us why it was wrong for David to take a census.
I always thought that it might be
It was the
that-
adversary.
Mine doesn't say that.
I think in Chronicles it might say one thing, and in Samuel it says
Okay.
another
Samuel
thing,
has God inside.
like a different. God
It's very
allows the
confusing.
adversary to incite David. I don't know, but
That's
this is
confusing.
didn't mean to open too much of a
Pandora's box.
Pandora's box with this, but I always kind of thought
Oh,
that.
I suggested Nathaniel join us.
Is that Nathaniel?
That's Nathaniel.
Oh,
What calls that now?
sure. So I'm restarting this. We were being joined by Nathaniel, and Bill was giving him a synopsis of. We were talking about them having to go to Bethlehem for the census, and I didn't mean to interrupt what you were saying.
We were switching, so he'll be closer to the
Oh,
phone.
okay. You're coming
That's
over
why
here.
we're
All
switching.
right, I got you.
I'm not leaving. That's yours.
Maybe next time I'll have us on have a video so they can see our pretty little faces.
Thank you. Oh, gosh.
Round and round the mobile.
So,
Well,
it's Monday at, what time where you are? Is it 9 a.m. there, or
10:22.
10:22 a.m. and it is
thank you.
You're welcome.
8:22 p.m. here on Sunday evening.
Seems so odd.
Yeah.
Did you have breakfast?
Yes, I had some Tropicana mango blend and a spicy crab meat and fish egg stick.
Oh my gosh. Crab fish
So
egg.
we are making us hungry.
Yeah, I'm making it. Wait until he's hungry.
Eat more pizza.
Oh my gosh, that's very oriental.
Pizza doesn't sound good.
So
Well, maybe we could.
you were saying something about, you were explaining the passage.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I got y'all.
We got into the, it was the Luke, the Luke passage with Mary and Joseph traveling to Bethlehem because Bethlehem was David's hometown, and Joseph was a descendant of David. Well, actually, Mary was as well. But they were traveling to David's hometown for this census. So they had to be in their ancestral hometown for the census. So they had to go from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and that put them on the road about 90 miles. So 90 miles on foot. Joseph would have walked because they were poor, but they would have gotten a donkey for Mary, on which Mary could have ridden. But still, 90 miles, that would have taken 4 to 5 days. If they made it in 4 days, that would have been, about 2.5 miles an hour for 8 hours a day.
I wonder why they didn't leave sooner.
Don't know, how much.
Give themselves more time.
Well, they may have. I mean, we don't know. It's not not
okay.
told in Scripture.
Oh, okay.
It was just a guesstimate about how long they, guesstimate, 8 hours a day, 2.5 miles an hour. If it were me, I would have gone a little slower and made the trip 5 days.
Yeah.
But it's still nonetheless a long time on the road
Oh yeah.
with a pregnant wife. That would have been the pits, and then getting to your relative's house.
Was it his relatives? Did they ever say that?
Probably would have been a relative's house. They wouldn't have had to really looked for an inn to
Unless
stay
their
in.
relative was an innkeeper.
Yeah, unless the relative was an innkeeper. But chances are good that it would have been some relative in Bethlehem to stay. But a room with the census, that relative would have been packed to overflowing. So they would have gotten the privilege of staying out with the animals. And thus, Mary would have given birth out in the stable. But living conditions, the stable would have been adjacent to the living quarters anyway.
Well, so in this story, we know that God uses the census in those circumstances to bring them to Bethlehem so that the prophecy is fulfilled.
Yeah.
We assume that's why the census and everything happened, and the travel and all that. But as I recall, there's not a prophecy about them not having to be, that he's being born in a manger and, not having room in the inn. What do you think is the significance? I mean, it certainly fits with the theme of what we're looking at in this Christmas series with all these, I guess, hard circumstances that people are facing, whether it's Joseph and the pregnant. Oh, go ahead.
I have a theory on that.
Okay.
I think it establishes that, Jesus kind of came from hard circumstances, and it makes a connection with the majority of people in the, I don't want to say lower classes, but I guess,
Yeah.
Allows people to connect with him.
I mean, yeah, it certainly seems like it's adding, because, in every aspect of if you look at the Christmas story, in every aspect of it, there's some sort of extra amount of difficulty, whether it's Mary being pregnant and having to ride on the donkey to Bethlehem, or the shepherds being out at night, and it seems like there are all these different, I don't know, aspects about the story that point that you just made kind of keeps coming up again and again, and it seems like maybe there's something really significant to that
Yeah.
it's almost like, I don't know, God's making a point or something. Not just making a point, but it's like a point that's being made over and over again. Like, it's like even just having to make this trip, and I mean, this is like kind of going the extra.
Well, he's establishing Jesus is Jesus for the people, not Jesus for the elites.
Yeah.
I think I agree with y'all on that. I think God wants it impressed on people that he wants everyone to know that through this, God is going to understand what it is to be a regular person, an ordinary individual in life. He's going to understand the circumstances through which people live and exist in everyday life. Their trials and tribulations. And they're not going to have the advantages that would come from an upper class living environment, and privileges that come from living with a few.
That's actually a pretty good title for this series. I was trying to think of a title, and I know we're like three messages or 3 discussions in, but she said Jesus for the people. That was kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of a good way of saying it. Because next time we'll be looking at the shepherds, and they were kind of considered outcasts and dirty, and they're out in their field at night.
I don't think I would have to spend some time research looking it up again, but I don't think shepherds were even allowed to be witnesses in court.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, I believe that's how low on the social rung shepherds were.
Oh. Huh. And they were the first witnesses, so that's interesting.
Pretty sure. I'll check that out for next time.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Huh.
But anyway, even stopping where we are tonight, the journey and that was very hard on Mary and Joseph. I know from I over 2 days as a Boy Scout, I hiked the Kentucky Lincoln Trail, which is shy of 37 miles in 2 days. And I tell you, by the time you get to Harrodsburg, the Lincoln Memorial there, you're really glad that it's over. And to be hiking 4 or 5 days would have been just really wearing.
Well, you do have to say they are at least probably on very flat terrain, on established roads. But, yeah.
Well,
Roman roads? Would they have been Roman roads?
Well, yeah, they would have been probably Roman roads.
Did Romans have nice roads out in those provinces that were
provinces? Well, yeah, but they're still dirt.
Yeah.
There's still dirt roads, and I'm pretty sure it goes uphill. Jerusalem is higher.
Much higher. Well, Galilee was Nazareth on the Sea of Galilee, or was it kind of close to it?
They're pretty much on the sea, so they're going from like 0 to about, I think Jerusalem's about 600 feet above sea level.
More, Jerusalem's like a couple thousand feet above sea level, I think.
Is it?
But the Sea of Galilee is like negative. The Sea of Galilee is below sea level. Because it's like a
height of Sea of Galilee. Height of Sea of Galilee. It's just listening to me.
Elevation of Sea of Galilee?
Elevation of Sea of Galilee. It's ignoring me. Would you mind looking that up? Elevation.
It's because you're on the phone.
I'm sorry.
Now, by the way,
I'm on the phone.
This is kind of separate news, but it's a good tool to use. But I would be using it if I wasn't recording. The XAI Grok is apparently free now, and I looked at it earlier today. So wait, what is the elevation of the Sea of Galilee? Is it negative?
The elevation of the Sea of Galilee is minus 696 feet.
Wow. And
elevation of Jerusalem. The elevation of Jerusalem is 2,475 feet. above sea
That's
So
level.
it was a
connected to
gain
sciences.
of
So they were
3,000 feet.
they were they were gaining 3,000 feet in elevation over that 90 miles that they were walking.
And most of that would have
Thank
been
you.
right at the
Uphill.
end
Wow.
of the trip, right? Would they go through Jericho and then go up? Because Jericho's below sea level, and the road from Jericho to Jerusalem was dangerous. You know, it was featured in a parable, but it's dangerous just because of the terrain and, you know, not just that, but robbers and bandits and all that. But
Oh my.
oh my!
Well, I did some quick maths, or calculator math, and that is, so it's a rise of 33 feet per mile, which is a 0.6% grade, I believe.
But I think most
That
of
difficult?
the elevation gain would be at the end of the
But then it
journey.
was just an average, yeah.
Well, what is
Yeah.
0.6%? Is that
That's pretty
pretty steep?
not steep.
No,
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I'm not sure that would be perceptible.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be an even, you know. I'd like
Still
to know
doing that over 4 days.
Yeah.
Just throwing in, the Sea of Galilee is the lowest freshwater lake on Earth,
Huh.
Huh.
and the second lowest lake in the world after the Dead Sea.
Interesting.
How low is
Huh.
the Dead Sea?
The Dead Sea, I don't know, but I'll find out.
You know, we went to Death Valley years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and there was the lowest point in North America, and I think it was like negative 180 feet or something like that. But this is negative.
How would you have a freshwater lake? I'm sorry, but we're already off topic. How would you have a freshwater lake that's below sea level? Because a
And I thought-
freshwater lake, I would think, needs to drain
Yeah.
so that it
That's
doesn't
weird.
get.
Yeah.
Well, does the Sea of Galilee drain into the Dead Sea?
From the Jordan River.
Yeah.
The Jordan River,
Goes into the Sea of Galilee,
Goes-
and the Sea of Galilee empties into the Dead Sea, right?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Dead Sea's a little
Okay, that
salty,
makes
isn't
sense.
it?
And the Dead Sea
And
is
the-
the Dead Sea because it's full of salt.
Salt.
Yep. And the Dead Sea doesn't drain anywhere, it merely evaporates.
So there's a loss of water there.
Huh.
And it is 1,410 feet below sea level.
Wow.
Kind of gives me a headache thinking about it.
Is that the lowest point on Earth? Like, that's
I'll find out.
That's on land, sort of.
yeah, that's on land.
Land.
It has to be.
It's got a good choice, got a good chance.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't many places below sea level.
The lowest land point on Earth is the shoreline of the Dead Sea, located between Israel and Jordan.
Huh.
Wow. Mercy. I
Mm.
had no idea. Approximately 420 meters, or 1,385 feet below sea level.
Huh.
Golly, I just can't imagine what that's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Would
Yeah.
be, wouldn't it? I know it's pretty hot there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just,
You can just float on the Dead Sea.
Yeah, because of the salt. Yeah. So most of the journey would have been through kind of arid land, and I mean, it wasn't necessarily, even the flat parts wouldn't necessarily be. I mean, you'd have to have provisions and.
Oh yeah, they would have had to have carried all their provisions with them.
Because I think between, you have kind of a green area around like the Sea of Galilee, and then you have, when you get close to, before you go up into Jerusalem, like around like Jericho and stuff, it's really dry, like a desert.
There
Where
wouldn't
Judah
have been.
Is mostly desert, right? Judah, that whole area, the Judean wilderness is pretty much desert.
I don't know that they would have been able to stop at any groceries on the way.
There might be a new Aldi's opening somewhere. It says summer is aggressively hot, averaging 93 degrees, but it has gotten up to 124 degrees Fahrenheit.
By the Dead Sea?
Mm-hmm. How do you manage 124 Fahrenheit?
Huh.
Wow.
Interesting.
Well.
So not an easy trip.
No.
No matter what time of year, because I guess in the winter it would get cold at night. In the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just you just have to wonder. I mean, God was with them and helping them, but as we've seen again and again in this story, it's almost like they get just enough help to make it through. Like they don't.
I wonder how much advance warning they had.
About the census and all that. Yeah, I don't know.
Joseph comes in one day, Mary, you won't believe what we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
The AI overview of Mary and Joseph's passage was difficult, dangerous, and strenuous.
Huh.
Their journey likely took place over a 10-day period. The hazards were many: wild animals, bandits, desert robbers. All these and more factored into the nature of the trip. The valley of the Jordan River was a forested refuge for lions, bears, and wild boar.
Good heavens. Never knew any of that.
Oh my.
Oh my. Yeah, no tigers?
The trip was 90 miles long, which is similar to walking halfway across Pennsylvania.
Huh.
The journey was hilly and included unpaved trails. They also had to navigate foothills near Jerusalem. The trip took place in the winter when it was cold and rainy.
Oh, gosh.
They would have needed to wear heavy cloaks to protect themselves from the elements. They faced many hazards, including bandits, desert robbers, and dangerous animals.
Wouldn't they be traveling with a small group? People kind of band together?
Mary's pregnancy made traveling uncomfortable, so they probably only traveled 10 miles per day. They had to bring their own food and water, which included dried bread, oil, and herbs. They also needed to carry water for cleaning, bathing, and washing clothes. Joseph was required to participate in a Roman census, which required men to register at their hometown.
Good grief. How could they carry all those provisions?
On the donkey.
And you noticed there was no honey. Joseph did forget it at home.
Huh.
Gosh. Ooh.
Well, so I guess that kind of makes the point. God protected them from the bandits and the wild boars and the lions and they weren't killed or maimed. but God didn't spare them from experiencing this really difficult trip and having to undergo all of that. Which I guess we can kind of see in our own lives too, right? I mean,
And we think we have it hard.
Yeah, well, we think we have it hard. Yeah, I mean, God brings us through things, and even if God is calling us to do something great, you very often have. There's no promise, I guess, that you're not going to encounter any difficulties, I guess I sometimes wish God would just, if it's God's will, I'll just know that it's God's will because it's going to be easy. Everything, not easy, but, I'm going to have success at every go, along the way. And there's not going to be like I guess even if you had perfect faith and you were perfectly obedient and did everything right, you'd still have, water that comes down this. And speaking of which, the water stopped. I don't know if they, in the middle of this, if you're listening to this, in the middle of the recording, we had in the room we're meeting, on the other side of the room, there was a big water leak. And we had to kind of stop things and inform the people about it, but that stopped. But, just like, I mean, that wasn't like anything that inconvenienced us, but you're still going to have this kind of weird stuff that happens, that like.
That was weird. Very weird to see suddenly.
There's Ken, the maintenance guy.
Behind you.
I was saying it was fortunate that someone was using that room at that time.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me pause this for a second. I'm going to go and let him know what happened. So we've done the journey.
We're there.
And real quick note on the manger. You can go to the site today. There's a place that is purported to be, and it's interesting if you have a chance to look at it. It's down in this. There's a church built on top of it. But the manger very likely was kind of a cave, kind of like a rock sort of thing. And there is a church there. I guess nowadays it's like kind of Greater Jerusalem, right? Bethlehem was pretty close to Jerusalem, but now it's kind of like sort of in Jerusalem today, right? Yeah, suburb of Jerusalem. You can go to this church and you go down into kind of like the basement, and there's like a little shrine kind of thing. And it's interesting to see. If you are listening to this, be sure to check it out. You can see videos on YouTube and stuff of people going there. But it's very different than how it's often portrayed, that it's like this kind of barn that's like out in the middle of nowhere is kind of how it's portrayed, but it was probably something that was near the house, and it was kind of a sort of a cave or a sheltered
Protection from the elements.
Yeah. Which I don't know if that makes it any better. You kind of have this image of like a cozy, dry manger with but as we're seeing here, it was probably wet and
smelly animals.
Smelly and kind of a cave like situation. Damp. So just something to keep in mind there.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jesus for the people. That's a good way to say it. And something to keep in mind that, when we're following God and, whether it's just in the basic life and morality stuff, or whether it's, you're doing something, having some great purpose you're working towards, you're called towards, you're going to encounter these difficulties, but very often God uses them to develop you, I guess, or to, and also, as we see here, one of the difficulties that they encountered was this trip, which was used to bring them to where they needed to be. So sometimes we don't know it, but sometimes these detours and these things, you know, that seem like problems bring us to where we needed to be.
It prepared them for the trip that they were going to have to take.
Oh yeah, that's true. They were going to have to take a much longer one in the near future to go to Egypt. So, do you have anything to add, Nathaniel? From across the other side of the world.
No, I think you all summed it up nicely.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Actually, it serves as a good element. I guess I did. To begin the story, it establishes, you know, where Jesus came from, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, this was number 48, and I will get number 47 uploaded before we upload this one. So we hope you have might hit 50 by the end of the year. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time, and we'll be looking at Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 21.